people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. Artingstall drops and outpoints Raven Chapman to claim the British featherweight title, the inaugural title, because there never was one before that. Artingstall impressively renounced herself on Friday night with a dominant and unanimous points victory over Raven Chapman to become the inaugural British featherweight champion on the latest Boxer all-female extravaganza, which delivered, by the way. Artingstall returned to the ring for the first time since January of last year and looked intent on making up the lost time with her UD win over a tough Chapman. The Macclesfield fighter can consider her performance at the Royal Albert Hall a statement made. I have to agree. Fighting somebody like Raven after a year on the couch, you must be really confident. She was. Got off to a rocky start in the first round that I scored to Raven Chapman for being the busier fighter throughout, the busier fighter in the round, and Raven was well on her way to winning the second up until she got dropped. The way it was, in the opening stanza, you could see the ring rust on Karis. A little flustered by Raven Chapman, who was aggressive and busy, the way you expect her to be. Enough that I gave her the first round, and throughout most of the second, it was more of the same. Karis is trying to get her distance and timing down right, while Raven is trying for a lot of punches and being the busier fighter of the two, that towards the end of it, I guess she stood in front of Karis a bit too long, and she got caught with a hard backhand that sent her to the canvas. So for the next 2 to 3 rounds, Raven's not fighting with the same intensity, weary of that backhand counter. She didn't want to get hit like that again. She felt the power and respected it as Karis managed the distance against an oncoming Raven Chapman, who was still coming forward, but was a bit more hesitant than she was in the first 2 rounds. Doing her best to turn the fight back in her favor, Raven certainly landed enough hard shots of her own to make it an entertaining fight, but Artingstall was always a few steps ahead of her as she repeated her victory from the amateur ranks. For those that don't already know, Karis and Raven had fought before as amateurs years ago. Years later, it would seem that nothing's changed. Karis won again. I thought the fight might end in a draw because Karis has been out for a very long time, but at the same time, Raven was coming off a loss. Those intangibles. And like I said, you could see that Karis was a little bit rusty at the start, but it didn't really take her long to find her groove. Scores of 98-91, 97-92, and 96-93 were difficult to argue with, as Chapman has gone from unbeaten world title contender to a 2-fight losing skid. But losing to perhaps the best 2 featherweights in the world is no disgrace. It will be interesting to see what she does next. She should probably target either the WBA or WBO titles, because while Amanda Serrano still has those belts now, Amanda looks all but done in the featherweight division. The trilogy with Katie Taylor was announced about 2 days ago at 140 pounds, and thus, I don't imagine afterwards Amanda's gonna drop all the way back down to 126. Not after having made all the money that she's made. It's more trouble than it's worth. So Raven should go after either the WBO or WBA titles, start fighting in eliminators if she can, so that if and when Amanda drops those 2 belts, she's in line to pick one or some of them up. Comes to Artingstall, and moving to 7-0 after a difficult 2024, Artingstall can now look ahead with much glee. Skye Nicholson, will defend her WBC title later this month against the American Tiaria Brown. The Australian is favored to turn back the challenge of Brown, and a future fight with Artingstall is a natural with a built-in storyline. It's an easy sell, and for different reasons, a fight that both need. After the fight, Karis Artingstall mentioned German champion, German IBF champion Nina Meinke, and I can definitely see that fight happening because to my knowledge, Nina is not otherwise preoccupied with anything. Preliminary reports seem to indicate that Sky Sports will stay in the business of boxing. They're going to renew with Boxer. There was a question as to whether or not they would. Now that we more or less know they're going to, this is a fight I expect to see later on this year. Karis is the one who brought her up. She wants to go through Nina so that then she can unify with Sky. What I think might be a difficult fight to negotiate because Boxer doesn't really like to outsource their fighters. That is, I don't think they want to outsource Karis over to Matchroom. Will Sky be willing to go over to Boxer? And if she does, can she win a points decision? Because she ain't no knockout merchant. Things to think about as we enter into the deeper end of the pool in the new year. Artingstall versus Nicholson. Isn't that far off? Karis. She impressed me. The way she was able to weather the storm, the flurry of punches, and the aggression of Raven Chapman and still get off clean work, neat and tidy, effective, and still strong. Karis. Damn good boxer is what she is. In men's light heavyweight news, an update to a story that we talked about here on the channel, that the World Boxing Council has taken it upon themselves to order the fight between Dimitri Bivol and David Benavidez, even though they are not next in the queue. The IBF is, and their mandatory challenger, Germany's own Michael Eifert, who's been the mandatory challenger for something like 2 years now. He became the IBF's mandatory challenger way back there in March of 2023, opposite the ring former champion Jean Pascal in an IBF final eliminator. And he's already stepped aside once to allow the rematch between Dimitri and Artur to be for undisputed. He's actually next in the rotation, not David Benavidez. So then why is the WBC trying to cut ahead in the line? I'm not completely sure what's going on behind the scenes, but outwardly, there seems to be a power struggle between what Turki Al-Sheikh wants, which is the trilogy between Dimitri and Artur, and this recent order from the WBC. You already have Michael Eifert to deal with. Settling that, now the World Boxing Council wants to order their mandatory even though it's not their turn. Turki Al-Sheikh recently stated that he is not interested in Bivol versus Benavidez and he will not bid on it. I think Dimitri Bivol knows who has delivered for him and who hasn't. My advice to Bivol, don't be late, because every day something changes. That sounds like an ultimatum. To which Dimitri Bivol has already responded. Waiting for the next move with my best team, Vadim Kornilov, Eddie Hearn, Turki Al-Sheikh, Riyadh Season, Matchroom, and Frank Smith. No mention of the World Boxing Council. What a mandatory they just called. Things you want to keep in mind. If this has become a power struggle, a tug of war, between Turki Al-Sheikh and the World Boxing Council for Dimitri Bivol's next fight, that's a war that the World Boxing Council don't win. And I don't know why they started it. You knew Turki Al-Sheikh wanted to do a trilogy between Dimitri and Artur, and you also knew that you're not next in the rotation, so why are you doing this? Are you expecting Dimitri Bivol to pledge fealty to you when you're the same people that kicked all the Russian fighters out of your ranks when that conflict between Russia and the Ukraine started? If it were up to you, Dimitri Bivol would have never got the chance to fight for the green and gold title. And now you're expecting him to pledge fealty to you? Then you start seeing a lot of the WBC's champions posting on their social media how they're proud to be WBC champions. Mario Barrios, Oshaki Foster, Carlos Adames, Stephen Fulton, Yemi Mercado, Ashley Gonzalez, Gabby Fundora. It's almost like Mauricio sent out an email to justify his existence within the sport of boxing at a time where somebody wants to kick him out of the party. Sent out an email to all the existing WBC champions to pledge their fealty to the green and gold, to the WBC, except you don't pay any of these fighters. The purses don't actually come from you. The purses to keep the lights on and keep the bills paid. And what champions did pledge their fealty to the WBC? Not a single one among them is a bona fide A-side or a big draw. Not a one. So if this was intended to be a display of power from the World Boxing Council, you really didn't display much. Who do you think you are? If what you're trying to do is force Dimitri to choose between you and another big Saudi payday, what do you think he's gonna do? Need I remind you? that if the World Boxing Council had it their way, Dmitry would have never even got the chance to fight for the green and gold title, because they said they wouldn't sanction a fight involving any Russian nationals. The only thing that changed their mind was Turkey's money. So eager to crash his party and get involved with what he's doing, forgetting that you're just the sanctioning body. You're not a broadcast network providing a promoter with an annual budget to do these fights. You're not the financier of anything. Your one function is to sanction fights and make sure you keep your ranks moving along, and you don't even do a good job of that. You're losing me. Turkey wants to do a better B versus Bivol trilogy. The World Boxing Council knows that, so why are they trying to jump ahead in the line ordering this fight? It's not even your turn. You're making things more difficult than they need to be. You want to force Dmitry Bivol to choose between being your WBC champion or getting another big Saudi payday? That's an easy choice. Go ahead and give the belt to David Benavidez, and see who brings you bigger sanctioning fees from their fights. The guy who's getting a big Saudi bag, or the guy in America who's still scratching and sniffing and trying to sell pay-per-views. Go ahead. I saw two-division champion Teofimo Lopez say, charging each 2% to 3% per fighter per belt, sanctioned. All you pro fighters are still eating chicken, and I am watching it. Crazy sight. Eventually, things will come to terms. I am hyped for the future of the sport we love, called boxing. What's he mean? This is being interpreted as a Cold War between Turkey El Sheikh and the Alphabet organizations, more specifically, the World Boxing Council, because I don't hear anything about a rift between the IBF and Turkey, or the WBO and Turkey, the WBA. This seems to be specific to the WBC. And who does more meddling within the sport than the WBC? Who sticks their nose in more people's business where it don't belong than the WBC? You'd think Mauricio Suleiman were trying to be a promoter. Except you don't pay for any goddamn thing. You run around trying to crash everybody's party, volunteering trinket versions of your assembly line of Alphabet titles so that you can siphon money from any event worth any kind of money. You're a parasite. And what you don't seem to understand is while your belt and some other belts might add some significance to a fight, that ain't what makes the fights happen. It's money. Money is what makes it all happen. Money makes the world go round. So if you want to go ahead and put Dmitry in a compromising position to where he has to choose between the money or your title, well, that's an easy decision to make, because to begin with, you didn't want him to have it. Money is what made it happen. Money is what got you to play ball. Somebody needs to explain why Alberto Puello gets a voluntary title defense of his choosing, but as soon as Dmitry wins the green and gold, you want to bog him down with a mandatory. No one Turkey's trying to do a trilogy. Mario Barrios has been WBC champion as of June of last year. You're not pestering him. Why are you pestering Dmitry? No one Turkey's trying to do a trilogy. And you ain't even next in the rotation to where it gets to a point where people start to ask, what the hell do we need from you? What do you actually do around here? Besides get in the way and overstay your welcome. So if Turkey and the World Boxing Council are now at odds with each other, I wonder how this affects their proposed WBC Grand Prix, because that's who's supposed to be at the center of that, the World Boxing Council. Except that Turkey would be the one paying for it. Because the World Boxing Council don't pay for shit. Or is this just Turkey pulling our leg again, the way he did with the Canelo versus Crawford negotiations? What's actually going on here? Because if this is a power struggle, if this is about power, the World Boxing Council has none, and you're not the ones to take on Turkey. What are you gonna take him on with? Alberto Puello? Oshaki Foster? Wake up and smell the sanctioning fees, baby. They make more money, and so do you, if you stay on Turkey's good side. So shut up! Quiet. And know your role. I think it's about time somebody reminded Mauricio. You're not a promoter. Stay in line. I saw veteran boxing scribe Dake Jonovan react to all of this by saying, if I'm the Benavidez side, I'm asking the World Boxing Council to immediately send this to purse bid. The statement all but eliminates most of the competition right out of the gate. And at the very most, that would allow David to acquire the green and gold title should Dmitry elect to vacate it. Which he might, but what's the title in and of itself really worth? Does that result in more pay-per-view buys for David's fights? And if he's not on board with what Turkey is doing, who is he going to fight? Who's he going to fight that's going to get him any money? Because we know the PBC by themselves don't actually have much of a stake in the light heavyweight division outside of David. Outside of David, they don't have the bodies, they don't have the names.
And they don't have any money.
Why would Turki LL Sheik all of a sudden become disinterested in putting David Benavidez in the ring with Dimitri?
What happened?
I can think of two reasons. For starters, David Benavidez's trip to Saudi didn't last very long. He left the same day he arrived before he could even take in the main event. That tells me that him and Turki didn't actually get to do any business.
That's one.
Here's two. Immediately after Bivol vs. Better Beef 2, Turki let it be known that he wants to do a trilogy. They're 1-1 with each other. A rubber match needs to happen.
David, having not stayed in Saudi long enough to discuss what he will do in the meantime, he's not a priority to Turki.
Perhaps if he would have stayed long enough to talk something out with Turki, maybe he could have fought on the undercard against the Callum Smith or a Michael Eifert.
But he didn't. Now you tell me, who boards a plane for 12, 15 hours, flies halfway around the world to leave the same day you arrive?
The whole point of going out there was being there for the main event, to scout the winner. You didn't even get to do that, and I think it's because you were instructed not to. As soon as you and your team realized that after the festivities, Turki's gonna want to talk business, they told you to get out of Dodge.
Get out of there.
So that when the smoke settles and the outcome is decided, when it's time to chart the next course, you ain't around because somebody didn't want you to be.
Now you're not a priority to Turki.
No, he's not interested in you. And he's not going to chase you down and twist your arm. If you don't want to be there, you don't have to be. But it's your loss.
All the money in the light heavyweight division is coming from two places, two primarily, none of which is the United States. You're either fighting those Brits like Joshua Buatsi and Callum Smith, Anthony Yard. There's some money over there.
Some. But the real money, the bulk of the cash, is flowing through Saudi.
Are you going to fight for this thing or what?
David Benavidez finds himself in an interesting position because you can wait for the WBC to strip Dimitri Bivol and give you that belt, but this is the same WBC that never ordered the fight between you and Canelo. You're going to pledge fealty to them?
Loyalty to them? They weren't loyal to you. They were loyal to Canelo.
Now you're going to take their side so that you can win an email title, be an email champion?
Talk about your booby prizes.
Then again, I never thought David was going to fight the winner of that fight. I never thought he really wanted it.
I still don't.
So, if he can win a belt at light heavyweight without having to share the ring with one of the two best light heavyweights, he might go for that. The chance to call himself a two-division champion for all of 2 seconds, because I still think he's going to cruiser. I still think he wants to fight Zerto.
We know a dialogue between Team Benavidez and Team Ramirez has already been established.
It's an interesting turn of events. It's a very interesting situation. Turki potentially being at odds with the World Boxing Council behind the scenes. The power struggle that has ensued when the World Boxing Council has no real power.
None.
At all.
You're not the financiers of anything. Don't ever forget that this is prize fighting, not pride fighting.
Before the World Boxing Council even existed, prize fighters were prize fighting, and you are overstating your role in today's boxing landscape.
Overstating your value, your relevance.
We'll see how this plays out.